Woo-jin from Old Boy 2003 is one of the best written antagonists in cinema history, if not the best written. There are still a lot of movies that I haven't seen, so I'm not going to make the case that there are no villains written better than him. However, I would be hard pressed to find one. Spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about the plot and the twist in here, so if you haven't seen Old Boy, stop this video right now, go watch, and then come back later. Contrary to popular belief, what makes Woo-jin such a well-written antagonist is not all the convoluted scheming and ultimate revenge plan he enacts on the protagonist Odesu, but how well we as the audience are able to understand his character and motivations. Nowadays, there's a lot of conversations around antagonists in modern movies and TV shows and how much more prevalent it is to see writers write these evil, sinister people or beings doing the most unspeakably horrific things and then trying to give them a redemption arc later down the line, or at least trying to write in a more sympathetic background to the character so that the fans can become more emotionally engaged with them. However, there is definitely a right and wrong way to go about this, and when writers go about it in the wrong way more times than not, more and more fans are starting to push back against the idea of a sympathetic antagonist altogether, saying stuff like how they miss when villains were allowed to be villains, and the writers didn't try to have you feel sorry for them or try to have you agree with any of their actions. When the sympathetic antagonist trope fails, the reason why most of the time is because the writers can't discern between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is defined as the feeling of sorrow or pity for someone's misfortune from a distance, and empathy is defined as the understanding or even sharing of feelings with someone by placing yourself in their shoes. When you see a writer try to give an antagonist a redemption arc, that means they've tried to write that character in a sympathetic way so that the audience will feel sorry for them and then later feel fulfilled when that character redeems themselves. However, the writer's intentions doesn't always translate to the audience's perception of it, because like in real life, there are certain things that people can do that they can't come back from, that once a character crosses a very specific line, there is no chance of redemption, and the audience can no longer engage with their character on a sympathetic level, no matter how tragic the backstory was or how dire their circumstances were. And then there are just some cases where we as the audience have spent too much time and effort in hating someone to ever reconcile with their character just because of a last-minute saving grace. In my opinion, the way Woo-jin is written explores both sides of this conversation the best, where you have this unrepentantly evil person and yet we're still able to engage with his character on a much more emotionally complex level than a typical villain. There's this clip of someone jokingly calling Woo-jin the biggest hater in movie history, and the director of Old Boy, Park Chan-wook, essentially responding like, hold up, wait a minute. Maybe try rewatching Old Boy, but this time with a more empathetic view of his character.
이우진은 반박 불가 시네마 역사상 가장 큰 헤이터다.
예. 그렇지만 이우진, 제가 이 영화를 10주년 때 보고 10년 만에 봤을 때는 또 이우진이 굉장히 공감이 가고 불쌍하고 다시 한번 보시기를 권하고 싶습니다.
I really love that he said this, because this is exactly how I watched it on my second time. The first viewing experience was mysterious, exhilarating, sick, and mind-blowing all at the same time just to watch the plot twist unfold. But it's really the second viewing experience that hit me the most just because of how profound I thought it was. Going into the movie already knowing what happens at the end forces you in real time to really consider how meticulous and how driven Woo-jin must have been in order to orchestrate everything as perfectly as he did. And it's in this consideration where a specific dimension of his character is on full display. His love for his sister, i.e. the driving force of this movie. What makes Woo-jin such a well-written antagonist is that the writers don't try to write him for sympathy, but rather empathy instead. They don't ever try to make us feel bad for him, even with him committing suicide at the end. There's no point in the story where you should pity him, because every misfortune that comes his way is entirely self-inflicted. Not only did he have a sexual relationship with his sister, but he had it on school grounds where anybody could have walked by and seen them, all because he was heavily insistent on getting some play at that moment in time, and he was really the reason why they got caught, because his sister wasn't even trying to do anything in the first place. Literally, any teenager who's seen a brother and sister getting freaky in the classroom would have went back and told their friends about what they saw. Of all the horrible things that the protagonist Odesu has done in this movie, this is by far the least egregious, because it wasn't even a rumor that he spread. He literally told someone a true fact, even told his friend not to tell anyone else, and then it spiraled into a whole web of rumors. But as the movie says, whether it's a grain of sand or a rock in water, they sink the same, which really exemplifies how petty and nonsensical Woo-jin's logic is. Woo-jin, without a doubt, is firmly in the wrong every step of the way. The incest was wrong, the murder was wrong, the abducting was wrong, the non-consensual hypnotizing was wrong. The movie never tries to justify it or give him any kind of moral leeway where you can make an argument that maybe he was somewhat in the right when he did such and such. No, literally everything he did was wrong, and that's what makes his depiction so good, because there are tons of everyday people like him who refuse to take accountability for their actions, and when they feel slighted, they make it their mission to take it out on the people they hold responsible. Obviously, Lee Woo-jin's character is about extreme of an examination you can go into a scenario like this, but the sentiments are very much applicable to real life. And when writers incorporate such a real life human aspect to an antagonist like Woo-jin and still allow for him and his actions to be fully in the wrong, we as the audience can then understand why he thinks he's in the right. No matter how twisted and petty his logic is or how sick and sinister of a person he is, he's still a person at the end of the day. He is still a human being who's confined to the constraints of human emotions. As passionate as he was in his vendetta against Odesu, as perfectly executed as his revenge plan was, as much power as he wielded over his enemy by the end of the movie, it still cannot measure up to the profound level of loss and grief that he felt and continues to feel with the death of his sister. No matter how messed up in the head we think it is for Woo-jin to love his sister in the way that he does, we cannot deny the fact that he cared for his sister very, very deeply. And it's in this recognition where we as the audience can empathize with his character and understand the sheer depth of his emotions, just based off our own experiences with love and loss, even if we cannot fathom why he has them for who he does. Love and loss are universal experiences of the human condition, and even someone as depraved as Woo-jin can experience it to the same degree as any human would with their lover, just in his own perverted way. It's through this empathetic lens where we can also view Woo-jin's story as a cautionary tale. Following the death of his sister, he accomplished everything he set out to do. He had his arch nemesis form an incestuous relationship with his daughter. He had him begging and whimpering at his feet, cutting out his own tongue in order to make amends with his sin of talking too much. Woo-jin ended up getting everything he wanted. He got the revenge, the joy and humor of it, the satisfaction, the complete and total power, and it still wasn't enough. Even with him being inhumane enough to commit all these reprehensible acts without feeling any remorse, he was not so inhumane that he could escape the full confinements of his human emotions. The pain of his sister's death was just too much for him to bear, and without really anything else to live for, he ended up shooting himself in the head. Even his one saving grace is written to be perceived from a place of empathy rather than sympathy. Woo-jin could have easily had Odesu's daughter find out about the incestuous relationship, but he opted not to for whatever reason. My interpretation of it is that it comes from a place of empathy, because even though he wishes the worst on Odesu, he remembers how that similar situation affected his sister, and he no longer wishes to inflict it on Odesu's daughter when he realizes that Odesu is genuinely regretful of his actions. The line, "My sister and I knew everything, but still loved each other. Can you two do the same?" is literally him putting Odesu in his own shoes, not so that Odesu will feel sorry for him, but so that Odesu can understand the full extent of what his actions inadvertently cost him. This is a textbook example of how writers can write an emotionally compelling antagonist that doesn't try to make fans feel bad for the villain, but rather just feel them. You can understand someone's torment without giving them the grace of pity and forgiveness. It's lessons like these that make me love the noir genre, whether it's film noir like Ace in the Hole 1951 or neo-noir like Old Boy 2003. If you like this video and want more content from me, then follow me for more and let me know what you thought about it in the comments.